So, thank you so much to the organizers for asking me to respond to this immense talk that we just witnessed. And obviously, I cannot give a proper response or a formal response, but I'd love to share some notes with you and I guess riff off a little from what Gloria has been speaking of. And I realized that actually a joint work of ours has been in this museum, exhibited, the book Kaleidoscopic Visions that we co-wrote and edited together with Michael Botman 16 years ago. And I was kind of proud to see a product of mine be exhibited in an art institution, and of course it had to be vanabbe. So okay, so thank you so much to the organizer for asking me to come and speak. I'm very honored to do that. And I was thinking, what should I say? Well, I was thinking back actually to the book that Gloria wrote, because it's been a year ago this month actually that White Innocence was launched. And this was also done in a museum, the Abbemuseum, and it was a joyous occasion and quite fitting that it took place exactly in that spot, in that place. One could argue that the Cultural Archive is displayed in all its grandeur in that museum. And at some point, at the sort of nearing the 500 mark of visitors, the Abbemuseum needed to stop the entry list from growing. And it's this rising and ongoing attention for white innocence is a testimony to Gloria Wecker's work and points to a dire need, even a hunger in the Netherlands for knowledge production that makes us aware, but also teaches us, and Charles Escher has spoke on that, teaches us to unlearn and to actually undo, to stop and think about what it means to live in a nation, and Gloria has expressed that already, with a colonial past which is so overwhelming in size, matter, and length, also in time. And I thought, I'm part of a research group called Mapping Slavery. I love maps, so I thought I would show you one to also basically, this is the stuff we were made of, in a sense. So this overwhelming colonial past is there, and yet, and I mentioned it, it is our victimhood overcome through World War II, which dominates our thinking when it comes to a contested and painful past. So that book presentation a year ago was a special and emotional happening. It was, a joyous space where black and white and people and everyone in between felt they were part of a community filled with solidarity, a place where we could be together, a place filled with hope. And much has happened since then. A Dutch translation of the book is coming. An everyday speech version of Gloria and Philomena Essett's work has been coming out with Hallo Witte Mensen by Nancy Jouwe. Wecker, with so many interviews under her belt now, has become somewhat of a rock star.
Goddess.
Goddess, rock star. Someone said to me the Beyonce of intersectional feminism as well, as has been said. So she has traveled through this Dutch space where she started out as this rather oxymoronic figure that is the black female intellectual. And now, a year later, we are here at such a beautiful occasion, becoming more in yet another museum space, the vanabbe. And I want to commend the vanabbe team and the group of external curators and organizers, leaders, especially for setting up such an important gathering. Charles, lots of you who are here. The museum is not just a material space, it's also a discursive place. And Van Abbe has shown that with Becoming More, but did it as well 10 years ago with their much talked about exhibit, Becoming Dutch. Many things took place there, and I will discuss one thing later on a little bit. But one thing that I wanted to point out is that they also did a lot. Like I said, it's still actually online, you can look it up also. They made a dictionary of keywords. You know, keywords that were important during those discussions. And now we find this an important feature and almost a necessary asset to further the conversation. But 10 years ago, it was actually perhaps seen a bit odd. And I like the fact that they were also trying to explain what the museum is as a space. So I thought I'd share it with you. Who was visiting Becoming Dutch? Who has been a visitor of that exhibit? Okay, well, that's like 10–15%. Okay, who's a first-time visitor here in the Van Abbe? Oh, great. Well, welcome. Yeah, more than 15%. That's wonderful. Okay, so this is what the Van Abbe says about the museum. The history of the museum extends back to the 18th century. As such, it has been one of the keystones of cultural democracy and a site where the contestation of aesthetic values have been played out. As a public institution, it has always had a political function, sometimes using that status to question itself and its political environment. We believe that the museum is one of the few sites in what is left of the public sphere where common topics can be addressed collectively on the grounds of art. The museum is, perhaps, a useful anachronism today in an increasingly privatized Western European society, yet it can successfully be used as a tool to expand the space for new thinking about our surroundings and our ways of life. Becoming Dutch intends to push the museum to reflect on its changing environment by reassessing its duties to art, artists, and to society. Well, did we succeed, we might ask. But this thinking was definitely not commonplace in the Netherlands at the time, and we could argue maybe it still isn't. Okay, so after these introductory notes, I just want to talk to you about two things. One, of course, is what does the cultural archive entail for us? And secondly, I briefly want to zoom back to Becoming Dutch. So to start with Wecker's cultural archive, when she was interviewed, she often heard from journalists, "Your timing is so good." And Wecker basically said, "Well, you know, I've been working on this stuff for over 20 years. But yeah, there was a sort of colliding, a perfect storm, as it were, that happened. But yeah, it's also, you know, a silly comment that so many journalists thought, oh, where's this woman coming from? And where's this knowledge production coming from? Like, you know, she's been around for a while. So what is that cultural archive? Well, the cultural archive, I explained it already, but I thought I'd beam it for you, is a particular knowledge and structure, and structures of attitude and reference, and in Raymond Williams' seminal phrase, structures of feeling, so that aspect of feeling. There was virtual unanimity that subject races should be ruled, that there are subject races, that one race deserves and has consistently earned the right to be considered the race whose main mission is to expand beyond its own domain. So if we let that sink in, for me it raises some questions, and I'm sure it does to you. One of the things is, how is this cultural archive being materialized in the cultural domain? And how do we sort of counter this? Well, this question, I think, is, for instance, reflected in the work that, for instance, Decolonize the Museum is involved in, an Amsterdam-based collective initiated by Hodan Warsame and Simone Zeefuik. And another question could be, how can we then influence that cultural archive? Where is our agency in this? Can we transform it by our own influence, for instance? Yes, hopefully, through books, through caucuses, through education, through art. And ideally, art can help us to imagine a utopia, a different world, by looking back and looking ahead. And related to that, how can art help us in understanding the issue Wecker and others have raised? This, to me, is an important question. Having worked in the Dutch cultural sector in different types of functions for 2 decades, I've come to know that sector is quite conservative and slow when it comes to issues of the cultural archive. There is a reluctance to intellectualize and to take a stance in these matters. A reluctance to think through on a deeper level what it means to a public cultural institution, what it means to be a public cultural institution in a pluralist 21st century. It collides with the deep rootedness of ideas of what art should mean and to whom. These ideas are deeply Eurocentric, and they have been cemented in our buildings and cast in our systems. So to undo and to unlearn takes a lot of painstaking effort. It's a long process and not a quick fix. As independent scholar Sarah Met, Gloria Wecker mentioned her already, pointed out recently at a talk in Amsterdam, diversity work, the work of trying to transform organizations by opening them up to populations for which they were not intended, generates data on institutions, snapshots of institutional life taken from the point of view of those trying not to reproduce that life. And that really spoke to me, those who are not trying to reproduce that life. So I want to share one snapshot with you, and I need to commend the individuals who operate in these white spaces and try and transform through curatorial practices. So curator Mirjam Weston of Museum Arnhem invited me in April 2014 to come and speak at the opening of an exhibition on Esri Eheri and Essie, an Amsterdam-based visual artist formerly from the UK. And when I entered the room, I truly entered a white space. I saw a sea of white faces in a white cube. And when I spotted Esri, I spotted the only other black person in the room. In that moment, when we saw each other and introduced ourselves to each other, we looked around and started laughing really loud. It was our moment of immediately understanding where we were, who we were, and why we were. It was our act of defiance, of understanding, of resistance. And in my speech for her, I talked about how Essie's artwork and work process reminded me of diving into that cultural archive. In her case, it meant literally grazing the archive, taking bits and pieces, mashing them up in an attempt to recontextualize history, connecting past and present. The past is as the prologue, if you will. I also talked about her artwork that sort of juxtaposed an upcoming movement of anti-racism in the Netherlands, which I just talked about and called the second wave. And that finally, race seemed to be discussed as not something for Dutch, which was connected just to Dutch neo-Nazis, but that it's actually something that involves all of us. And while I said all these things, the audience collectively looked at me like a deer in headlights. And when my speech was done, a white, somewhat older woman came up to me and who seemed to know me from my work in the Papuan refugee community here in the Netherlands. And she didn't make any remarks on my talk. She wanted to point out that knowing that I was a Papuan, she wanted to point out how well I spoke Dutch. And then, of course, then I could not really be a Papuan. I am sure that her intention was not at all to be offensive, but yet there we were. And when I answered with slight ironic undertone that in fact I was born and raised in the Netherlands and trained in the Dutch schooling system, she did not respond and gave me that same deer in headlights kind of look. I had shattered her image of what a Papuan should look like, be like, and speak. And it seemed that her brain could not process that yet. Okay, so these encounters, these snapshots, by the way, this is one of the works that was on show by Nancy. Yeah, these snapshots are what we are made to deal with, we have to give it a place in order to move on and to move ahead. And, you know, sometimes you need to invoke a little Audre Lorde into your life to, you know, heal yourself again from that moment. And I know, you know, Gloria loves Audre Lorde, they were close friends, so I thought I also, you know, throw her in there, but I think this quote in that sense is also very important, that, you know, it is not our job to constantly educate you. It is something, and I think in a way Charles said it as well, that we really need you to, we all need to get educated in that sense. And it also, you know, helped me in the importance of, so one of the things I'm involved in is the Mapping Slavery project. And there's a lot of things, I'm not going to talk about that, but for us the importance to actually also show the history of Black presence in the Netherlands over the centuries is quite important in that sense. Okay, my second point, and then I'm done, is the Van Abbe. It's much shorter. Van Abbe and yeah, the workers of cultural archives and the landscape of Dutch cultural politics, if you will. So, little known fact is that the Mondriaan Fund, at the time the Mondriaan Foundation, financially supported the project of Becoming Dutch with the first and last ever diversity prize. Did you know this? Okay, some of you are nodding. This was actually a prize of $500,000 that was issued, and Van Abbe won it, and that's one of the reasons why they actually could do this wonderful exhibition. And it was interesting because the political landscape was such that this prize was installed, but that same political landscape took care of a quick exit out of the back door of that prize, basically. And this booklet was issued by the Mondriaan Fund. I was actually asked to participate in setting it up. I interviewed Annie at that time and on what she thought about how, you know, on Becoming Dutch. And I showed it to Iris just now, and she said, you know, that's actually collector's items. We can't, you know, we can't write it anymore. But, you know, you can buy it off me. But yeah, and one of the, I think, in hindsight, most impactful works that was on show during Becoming Dutch was, of course, the work of Annette Kraus and Petra Bauer. Who took on Blackbeat, and I remember Annie, you telling at an event that you actually showed your new intern this project was a lot of things, and one of the things they did was make a visual essay of an hour and a half called Read the Mask, Tradition is Not Given. I think it's on Vimeo, so you can look it up online. I highly recommend it. And I remember you telling me that, or us in the audience, that you showed it to your new intern and that she came out of the room with steaming ears. So she was so angry at what she had seen. And can we imagine how we've moved on from there in a way? And also, of course, this young man had been very much inspired by their work. So when I curated a two-day gathering called Black NL, I just basically put them together on the stage to talk about this whole tradition of resistance through art, which I think is really important. So, Dutch intellectuals from multiple generations, like Wecker, but also people like Essen and Hoving, have been instrumental in an academic landscape to move it along. And also a young scholar like Remy Limbach has shown that historians have been mincing words too much when it comes to the incredibly violent colonial past of the Dutch. Yeah, okay. And it's interesting. Who hasn't read it yet? Oh, okay, a lot of you have read it. That's good. It's interesting. Yeah, I just went to Germany to watch the last weekend of this German exhibition on colonialismus in Berlin in the Deutsche Historisches Museum. It's really interesting. And the Germans are much more intellectual in their texts, and then they have this other text beside the text that's this Leichtsprache. It's like normal speech. In a way, you can see her book as Leichtsprache for Gloria's work, and it's so important that we do that, and we need both. You know, we really need it, and it's so. I think it's wonderful that her book is becoming a bestseller also very fast. Okay, well, you know, I would like to end with a plea in order to move along that we need to get busy in the art sector and get over ourselves in thinking that art is just for art's sake. And I'm saying this because the international art policy the coming 4 years is going to be art for art's sake. La pour la, yeah? We cannot, you know, it's unbelievable. Sorry?
Ironic.
It's ironic. Okay. Thinking that art is just for art's sake is ironic because it really is not. Thank you. Zijn er krukken? Want dan gaan we even zitten. Zo even krukken. Is het oké?
Yeah. If people want to respond, because this is the moment, right? We've had an incredible sort of and thought-provoking hour already, and I would love to just exactly offer the platform to both of you. See if people maybe would like indeed to offer and comments or questions.
Hello, thank you very much for your talk. I think it's very important what you express, of course, the awareness of the differences in what you called the grammar of difference. But in a way, I wonder, is it just enough as well? Because in a way, when you talked about race, so let's not say there is race. So if you ask from the white privilege to acknowledge and to, in a way, have this awareness to, I feel that it's a certain gesture that perpetuates the racism because it has a certain condescendence, where as white you acknowledge and give, but it is such a strong history as well of exploitation and of humiliation, of the way the other subjectivity was formed through this. So I'm wondering, the whole purpose of colonialism was economical, and if in some countries like here there is a certain prosperity that comes out of the looting that came out of it, I'm wondering now if the new form of colonialism is not this hard laws of immigration that is put in Europe, where some people have access to the privileges of the looting, and others not. And in a way, isn't it, shouldn't we also, I mean, I don't know if maybe it's, I know it will be, I don't know how it will be politically, but in a sense, it is also, I think, it is important as well that that this wealth is distributed, not only in the sense that it's ideal, but also in who can have access to this wealth. I think it's more than just awareness and saying, okay, I'm sorry, or this or that. I think there should be a retribution in that sense. And it's not retribution in the sense that you have to pay, or it's just how it is. I mean, if you know, it's equal possibilities that have to be offered. And I really feel that more and more in this atmosphere of right wing, of immigration stopping, or it is just a continuation of this. So I don't know what would you think of that. It is colonialism. It is the goal of colonialism, which was amasser, to take wealth, you know, primal. I'm forgetting the word now, but yes, amassement of wealth, like when you know of wealth gathering, let's say, and I think now this is I think this is where colonialism now is the immigration policies. I think, I don't know, what would you think about that?
Right. Okay, thank you. Of course, I agree with you, but I also think that it will be incredibly more difficult to realize that. You know how in the Netherlands, even talking about the past, that politicians are very careful not ever to even, apologize. But it is like, for them, immediately what would follow would be the expectation of retribution, that now they will need to pay up for what was the riches that were amassed in the past. I agree that it is accumulated inequality that is still going on, and that is very visible in the way that Europe deals with refugees, and how borders are resurrected, that the Turkey deal now should be expanded to Libya with regard to African refugees. It is outrageous, really, what is happening there. At the same time, if it comes to, how do you call these payments?
Reparation.
Reparation, yeah, when it comes to reparation, I would be in favor of having those monies that would ideally be a form of reparation, to invest them in education. I was very pleased the other day when I was contacted by somebody who is working at a professional school for education in Rotterdam, who's trying to think about what she can do. Her position is to study how we can change education. So she's thinking about training teachers who teach at primary, secondary school, how to introduce different systems of thought in the training schools for teachers, PABOs. I would really be in favor of doing something with that money in terms of education, and part of that money also should go to the third world in amounts that are ever becoming smaller. It's not as it used to be before. I personally do not know maybe this is too pragmatic, how successful we will be in enforcing retribution to the former colonies. I don't know whether that will be a successful endeavor, but I would be inclined to be more pragmatic and to put the money into real, clear, concrete projects that would benefit people here and there.
Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, just maybe a little side note. What's interesting in the Netherlands, obviously the official stance of the government has always been not to apologize, because if you apologize, that costs money, right? One thing, it's the Dutch. But so, what's interesting, what you see is that there has been a joint venture between an Indonesian activist who has been living here with a high-profile human rights lawyer who've gone to court to lobby for reparations for widows of Indonesian civilians who had been killed in the colonial war between 45 and 49 in Indonesia, which was sort of euphemistically called police actions, but it was sort of a full-on war, because never has the Netherlands sent out so many troops to a foreign outside situation before. But actually so there's been 3 court cases, and they've all 3 won those court cases, which was really incredible. And so that was the first time that the Dutch actually officially then apologized also for the atrocities, but it was just a tiny bit of the atrocities that they sort of apologized for. But it's interesting to see that the court is actually a sort of venue where you can where you can demand sort of your judicial citizenship, if you will, in order to get something which is otherwise not being gained. So I think we'll see more of that, actually. So it's going to be a long road in that sense. But that's what's been happening in the Netherlands, as opposed to, for instance, the German situation we had, etc. So that type of tradition we do not have, obviously, here. I don't know if that answers your question.
Two? Yeah.
Should I?
No, yes.
I want just to compliment. You spoke about reparations and briefly about the Holocaust, and I was thinking in which extent can the Holocaust stop being a competing narrative and just trying to help understand and also better express racism now in Netherlands.
Who do you want to ask that to? So someone has written about that. Michael Rothberg, for instance, has talked about multidirectional memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where actually, let's not have it be a zero-sum game. Let's, inspire each other to move along. And I think that's actually also happening. In the rhetoric, it often seems like they're competing, but I think a lot of sharing of comparing notes is actually taking place, which I think is really important, especially in the Netherlands, where I think that the reparations movement is not as strong as it could be compared to what's happening in France or in England, for instance. So that's what I can say about that.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to add to that, but that's obviously what needs to happen. It is really a diversification of memories that needs to take place. That, the memory of the Holocaust should take into account that there were different places where people suffered from the consequences of the Holocaust. it is also always so very painful, I find, around the 4th of May, that one of my great uncles, who was a Jew, who came from Suriname to study medicine in the Netherlands, he also was killed in Auschwitz. That there's no thought devoted to Jews who came from elsewhere, like from the colonies. So we need to broaden our vision, and I find, unlike what Nancy is expressing, I find a distinct resistance to broadening our memory of the Second World War. I think there is a real lobby to keep it limited and to keep all kinds of other people out who do not properly belong in it. I think there is a lot of work still to be done. So in some places, like where I live in the southeast of Amsterdam, there's a 4 and 5 May committee that really is very much into transmitting diverse stories. And the Freedom Meal also is one of those places where you can hear all kinds of different narratives, but I would say that the dominant way in which we have memorialized the Second World War is every year we have these outbursts and anger about who is properly memorialized during this day. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, first of all, thank you for the very, very, very interesting keynote speeches. I just wanted to point out the importance of the work that you're doing, especially in terms of representation, because Nancy was explaining, the first time that I came into the Vanabbemuseum, I was 12 years old. I grew up in the south of the Netherlands, in this city, and I was indeed entering a very, very wide space, and wideness in a very overwhelming way, in a way that not being able to visually even imagine yourself be part of that institution, and then having that really traumatize the shit out of you. So that's basically what happens, I think, when young people of color enter these white spaces. I just wanted to ask that question also directed to that experience, growing up black outside of the bigger cities of the Netherlands. A lot of people of color and black people live in obscurity in the south and are not really recognized in their existence, even by their skin folks, so even by black people in Amsterdam. And you were saying, Amsterdam has always been at the forefront of these movements, but I feel that in a way it has been a struggle to make those thought processes and about radical activism and intersectionality, to make them penetrate the collective memory of being Dutch outside of Amsterdam and being and becoming black outside of the Netherlands. And I was wondering, from the time that you were working on becoming Dutch up until now, have there been changes? Have you seen any changes? Also, if you haven't seen any changes, what can we do to have all these theories and this way of this resistance and way of living in defiance penetrate the collective thought of blackness outside of the blackness that we see as being from Amsterdam, being from the biggest cities?
You're so chicken now.
You mean changes, particularly in the art scene, also, or just in general?
In general, anywhere.
South and Amsterdam.
Because I had to go to Amsterdam to actually be exposed to all of this. When
Right.
you say that you've been working on this right under my nose, so where did it go wrong?
No, yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Well, you know, I grew up in in a small town, but with a big university, Delft. It's a small town, but it has a big technical university. So when I sort of entered the squatters movement there, I was kind of looking for my, black kinfolk. Like, where are my people? They so weren't there. So yeah, I mean that's very difficult, and at the same time, it's really cool to build a community with like minds. We want to romantically change the world, which we did. But then you realize, you gotta start organizing, start connecting. I tried to do that actually in another white space, which was the University of Utrecht, which again was a very white space. And I think a lot of stuff that I've been doing in Utrecht, for instance, has not been recognized by people from Amsterdam because they don't know it. But actually, I'm going to say it. But actually, when I did a program on the history of slavery in the city of Utrecht in 2011 and 2012, people came from Amsterdam to learn about these things because they were like, okay, we're not actually hearing this in our town. But when things grow bigger, they go to Amsterdam. This is the hegemony of Amsterdam, if you will. So, and Rotterdam, my Rotterdam people represent, is the true big city, of course, as we know. I think we should sort of deconstruct that black Amsterdam hegemony a little bit more. But also the thing is, we do not know our stories as we know our American black stories. We know all the American black stories because they are researched so well and marketed so well. And we've not, right? We've marketed. Oh, what? Oh, okay. So that's also the type of work. One of the things I'm gonna dedicate myself to is people. Find all the people of color in the squatters movement and interview them. And how did you survive that? What did you do? Did you look? I want to know.
I just wanted to...
Please add to the conversation.
Yeah, I would just want to respond to your question. Yeah. I just thought that was the greatest question ever. And I just want you to know
Do you know each other?
No, I have no
idea.
idea.
You should know each other.
But I just wanted to say that in the United States, there is also from the people from the South feeling the same about the centralization of the black experience in the North, specifically New York and those kind of areas. So there is also there, you have this feeling that people from the South feel like that their story is being overruled by the story of the people of the North. So I would just like to ask you, I don't know who you are, just write down your story, right? So that we can learn what it's like to be, not in the big cities, because it will add to our knowledge and give us a greater understanding of what it is like to be a black Dutch person. So thank you for the question.
Well, Christelle is also part of she founded the Shiro movement, which I think is really cool. She's a black Twitterati, she's an awesome writer. Okay. You can hear her on the podcast. Ditsaus, exactly. And now you have a question.
Okay. Maar kan ik ook nog even hierover iets zeggen?
So now I know who you are. I know we met once outside of the dam, the palace of the dam, on the dam. But I
remember with that guy coming up.
I know, having lived also in the provinces, that it's a very different story, where you're located. And I have also family members living in Groningen, I think it is no joke to be out in the boondocks. I shouldn't say that, you know. These kind of decentral places around the time of Zwarte Piet. What I hear from my family members, it's no joke. And at least there is the strength of numbers in Amsterdam more, where you can get together and think of strategy. I also think, whereas in Amsterdam it is much more common nowadays for parents, black parents, parents of color, to go to school and to say, I do not want my kid to be exposed to this nonsense, that is much more difficult to do in Eindhoven or wherever. But I also think that it cannot be the case that it will be only in the big cities that some kind of consciousness, black consciousness, is thriving. So we need to see to it that that gets spread more evenly. And I think writing your story, as Charles is suggesting, is very important. And if you think that there is anything we can do to help that process, I will really be willing to think about that, if I can be helpful in some way. I mean, I'm here, right?
Yeah, so I have two things I want to ask. Okay, so some people and their stories are, well, they die out within a generation, and others are mythified because they fit the colonial narrative. And I'm asking this question because kaleidoscopic visions is not in print anymore. How do we make sure that the work that has been done, that another generation doesn't have to like find out the wheel or reinvent the wheel anymore? So that's my first question. And the second question, you're the second person, like within a couple of days actually, who has, pointed out the problem of white leftist allies. Ramon Rosugul last Sunday also talked about...
Festival?
No, it was a different event.
Okay.
That I attended, that Ramon Rosugul was talking about this and basically silencing us, especially, he pointed out, silencing women of color and speaking for us instead of with us or listening to us, and very much pointed out listening. So how can we, aside from like saying, but I feel like we have been saying for decades, listen, aside from this listening, like the action now. So yeah, this is something I'm worried about because a lot of events are happening, especially because, you have brought out your book, Anusha has brought out her book, and a lot of, women of color are doing the work, but now then other people are doing stuff around that, which is really problematic and goes into, you think they are your allies, but then problematic stuff happens and then you call them out and they have this idea and no. So this is, what can we do?
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I add? Annie, could you tell something about the protest march that was planned during becoming Dutch?
Maybe later, but let's let this.
Well, it's kind of adding to what that lady is saying.
Well, I think let's have an answer.
Because you're not listening.
But becoming Dutch is like this example, and then.
Well, let this exchange happen, and we can.
Come on, stop interrupting this question.
So, okay, what can we do? Well, what I did when that particular event happened, the reason why I knew that this was not okay was that a couple of months ago, the same thing happened. It is a pattern. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie came to the Netherlands. She was invited at Atria, the Women's Center, Archive, an institute for the women's movement. What does Atria do? Ask a white woman to interview her.
Who didn't know her work really well.
Yeah, but aside from that,
No,
what is that about?
Yeah.
You know, aren't there black women who can do this? So luckily, and I will mention her name, Simone van Saarloos, thought this is not okay. A black woman should interview Chimamanda. So Nancy did it. We need to stop and think about these patterns, these practices that are so ingrained, that speak of privilege that you do not have to question, that naturalize whiteness, and that you are well positioned to take this role over and above somebody of color. Why would that be the case? Also, what kind of impression is given to these people from abroad that it is not problematized that a white person is doing the interviewing? So that means that we simply do not have black people capable of doing that. I think this is really a serious business, and I want to act against the impulse that the racism that we have in the Netherlands is only a matter of underclass people, Tokkies, PVV, and etc., etc. It is very present in upper class, middle class circles also among people whom we would like to consider our allies. So there's a lot of work to be done, not necessarily by us, I think. This is work that should be done by white people. I also want to point out that in these conversations, which is really nice, it always strikes me that white people are dumbstruck. It is the people of color who are speaking up, asking the questions, which is nice for a change, but really, this is your problem, right? It's the problem of white people. I really would like to urge you to go to I'm Not Your Negro. You really have some serious work to do here. So, I mean, you better start thinking about it. It is not out of the goodness of your heart that you are going to do this for us. You're doing it for yourself and for a society that is more pleasant for all of us to live in.
Yeah, so amen to that. And to your first question, this has been a thing on my agenda for a very long time. I'm going to actually mention the same institution, Atria, who actually sort of came up to us to say, I mean, we're at fault here as well, I have to say. I mean, we've been sort of half-heartedly been trying to, for instance, Kaleidoscope Visions, to have it translated, and we never really got around it. This is the thing also about being such a small community and feeling sort of overworked and overwhelmed all the time because there's so much to do. Anyway, but I mean, we really should have done it, and we didn't. But Atria at a certain point wanted to, connected to us and said, well, we want to put it online, the book. And then they went missing in action again, so that's, it's really half-heartedly also. And in that sense, the whole sort of do-it-yourself mode is something, that we should also revisit in that sense, and do it ourselves. But I hear, it's in the library, and people keep telling me that people are constantly, taken it from the library, which I mean, it was, 4 years ago that started again a little bit. I was like, what? Okay, so people are interested, which is weird. Huh? So in that sense, it also made us realize again, how important that is. But you're right. You're absolutely right. We should.
I hope it will be translated still in English to be part of the international narrative. I think that's very important.
Yeah, but then I feel that it needs to be updated, and then I think
This is
oh
the
my God,
discussion all the time.
when am I going
This
to
is
do
where it
that?
goes flat.
Yeah, because it's 2001.
Yeah,
It's
it
16
is.
years
It
ago.
is. It is. It is. Should we do one last question?
maybe
Because
one, yeah.
because it's very hot in here. We need a
Yeah,
drink,
I
right?
wanted to say something about the ally part.
Oh,
So during Become Dutch, the project you referred to, they wanted to hold a protest march. I
right.
don't know exactly, Annie can tell better job than me about what exactly went wrong there.
Well, the short of it is that there was so much outside aggression,
Exactly.
repression.
But shouldn't it have been done anyhow?
Yeah, in hindsight, we can, philosophy. Yeah,
So that's the ally part. So when
Yeah.
it becomes aggressive,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
shield.
Well,
I mean-
I don't know the ins and outs of what went on inside.
Yeah.
One would hope that one's allies, would stand by you in times of need. I know, I've written about it, I've analyzed the case, at least
I've analyzed the hate mail that came in a matter of maybe a couple of days. It was 2008, it was overwhelming. I thought, oh my God, this cannot be true. By now, I think, we have become so used to the violence of hate mail. Every time I am on television, I know this is what is going to happen. I'm going to be vilified, all kinds of nasty stuff is wished on you. That was quite new in 2008. I think, it may have been scary to receive all this hate mail, but I also think that it is important. You are not an ally just because it's a nice thing to say. It demands hard work to be somebody's ally and to be there in times when it gets hard. So I cannot speak specifically to what happened here, but I do know that it's incredibly important to have allies, but also to know that they won't back out when it becomes difficult.
Should we get drinks?
Yeah.